The phone rang just as I was pouring my second cup of tea. I'd been sorting through utility bills, cross-checking them with the modest pension I now relied on. The caller ID was a number I didn't recognize, local, but unfamiliar. Normally, I let those go to voicemail. But today, something in my chest tightened, and I picked up. Mrs. Whitfield. The voice was rough but careful. This is Everett Banning. I run Banning & Sons Pawn off Fremont. I believe I have something of yours. I sat up straighter. I'm sorry. What is it you think you have? A Rolex Submariner. Black dial steel band. Engraving on the back. The mug nearly slipped from my hand. I set it down, slowly, my breath already short. That's not possible, I said. I have that watch. I figured as much, he said. But you might want to check. I didn't say another word. I crossed the room, walked into the study, and pulled open the top drawer of the old oak desk, my husband's desk, now mine. The velvet-lined box that held the watch was always there, tucked between envelopes and legal pads. I checked it every few weeks just to feel close to him. The drawer was empty. My hand hovered inside the space where it had rested for the last 3 years. It wasn't misplaced. It wasn't moved. It was gone. Mrs. Whitfield, Mr. Banning was still on the line. I swallowed. It's missing. I was afraid of that, he said. Look, I didn't want to say more over the phone, but it didn't sit right with me. If you can come down here, there's something you should see. I didn't bother changing clothes. I grabbed my keys, locked the front door, and drove without even brushing the hair out of my eyes. The streets blurred past me, a haze of red lights and strip malls, but the pressure in my chest only sharpened with every turn. The watch was the last thing Morris gave me. 3 years ago in the hospice room, as the sun slipped through the blinds and he could barely raise his voice. He'd unclasped it from his wrist with trembling fingers and pressed it into my palm. This is yours now, Lenora, he whispered. Only yours. He'd worn it every day for 40 years. Through our wedding anniversary dinners, our son's graduation, my mother's funeral. He never took it off, not even when chemo thinned his arms and loosened the band. That watch was part of him, and now it was gone. I turned into the gravel lot behind the pawn shop. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. A man with a stooped frame and silver eyebrows looked up from behind the counter. You must be Mrs. Whitfield, he said quietly. Come with me. It's in the back. I followed him through the narrow hallway, my breath catching as he unlocked a worn leather case and opened the lid. Inside, glinting under the fluorescent light, was Morris's watch. Smaller than I remembered, still ticking and waiting. Mr. Banning didn't need to ask my name. As soon as he saw me, he gave a slow nod. You look like Morris, he said. Same eyes. The words caught in my throat. No one had said his name to me like that in months, like it still mattered. I didn't recognize the woman who brought it in. He continued. Said she was family. Her story was neat, too. Neat. Claimed you'd given her permission, said you were downsizing. That's a lie, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. I never told anyone they could touch it. He sighed and slid the leather case toward me. I've run this shop for 35 years. Your husband used to come in sometimes, tools mostly. Always repaid his loans. Quiet guy, but decent. So when I saw this watch, I knew something wasn't right. Morris would never have let this go. My fingers hovered just above the metal. It was definitely his. The small scratch across the crown, the slight wear on the band. But what took my breath was the engraving on the back, still visible after all these years. To Lenora, time is ours. Love, Morris. Banning cleared his throat. While inspecting it, I noticed something strange. A seam where there shouldn't be one. I thought maybe it was damaged, but when I pressed here, he demonstrated gently pushing on the edge of the case. The back opened. I stared. I had never seen that before. Never even knew it was possible. Inside, nestled in a hidden compartment, was a scrap of paper folded into a square, no bigger than a postage stamp. "I didn't read it," he said. "Didn't feel like mine to open." With shaking hands, I unfolded the paper. It was Morris's handwriting, tight, deliberate, a little more strained than I remembered, but unmistakably his. "Lenora, if you're reading this, it means the watch has been taken. Go to safe deposit box 329 at First Federal. The key is taped inside my old socket wrench case. M." I clutched the paper, heart pounding. Morris had planned for this. He knew somehow that someone might try to take what was mine. What was his? What was ours? I looked up at Mr. Banning, who nodded solemnly. "I haven't filed anything yet. The paperwork's still sitting back there. Technically, the transaction hasn't happened." I closed the case and stood tall. "Then I'll take it home where it belongs." He handed it over without a word. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I already knew exactly where that toolbox was, and exactly who I'd be seeing after I opened it. The scent of burnt toast and over-steeped coffee met me before I even stepped into the kitchen. I could hear their voices low, clipped, the kind of tone people use when they're trying not to be overheard. Camille sat at the head of the table, hair pulled into a severe knot, tapping her pen against a spreadsheet. Julian leaned over her shoulder, murmuring something I couldn't catch, and Delphine, still in her robe, sipped from a mug that read, "Boss Lady," in gold script. None of them noticed me at first. I set the leather case on the counter with more force than I intended. The clack silenced them. Camille glanced up, lips already curling into that patronizing smile. "Morning, Lenora. You're up early." I opened the case and turned it toward them. The watch caught the overhead light and glinted like a warning. Camille's smile vanished. "You took it from my desk," I said flatly. Julian looked down at his hands. Delphine tilted her head like she didn't understand. Camille scoffed. "Oh, for heaven's sake, it was gathering dust. You never even wore it. It wasn't yours to touch. It wasn't doing anyone any good. Mom needed startup capital, just a little boost to get the new catering site running. She's rebranding everything." Delphine chimed in like it explained something. "It's just a watch, Lenora." "No," I said, my voice low. "It's the only thing Morris left me. He didn't leave stocks or houses or trust funds. He left this." Camille leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Well, it's done. You've got it back. No harm." "I want the money," I said. "All of it." She exchanged a quick glance with Julian before giving a theatrical shrug. "It's already spent." He still wouldn't look at me. "Then you'll repay it," I said. "Every cent." Julian finally spoke. "Lenora, let's not turn this into a war over a piece of jewelry. You made it a war the moment you decided your wife's business mattered more than your father's memory." I picked up the case and turned to leave. The hallway felt colder than usual, but I walked through it with purpose, straight to the garage where Morris's toolbox had waited all these years. The red metal creaked as I unlatched the lid of Morris's toolbox. Dust rose like breath held too long. Everything inside was just as he'd left it, organized, labeled, quietly dignified. My fingers found the socket wrench case, almost immediately worn soft at the edges from years of use. I opened it, and there it was, taped carefully to the inner lining, a small brass key with a tag. First Federal Box 329. I held it for a moment, letting the metal press cool against my palm. Then I drove. The downtown branch hadn't changed much since the 90s. The marble floors still shined with that odd yellow tint, and the vault room smelled like old paper and lemon polish. The manager, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, didn't ask questions when I handed over my ID and the key. She led me into the quiet corridor behind the vault and pulled box 329 from its slot. "Take your time," she said gently before leaving me alone. The box was heavier than I expected. I set it on the small table and opened the lid. Inside, a thick envelope of bearer bonds neatly stacked and bound, at least $120,000 from the quick count. A leather notebook corners cracked with age. Flipping through it, I found pages of handwritten entries, client names, job details, amounts owed, debts Morris had never chased. And on top, a letter, folded in thirds. My name on the outside. I unfolded it slowly. Lenora, if you're reading this, then someone crossed a line I prayed they wouldn't. I didn't leave much, but I left this. A reset. The bonds are clean and the notebook's yours. Don't let the noise of others tell you what you deserve. You were always the builder. I just held the hammer. My hands trembled, but my heart steadied. He had seen what I hadn't yet been ready to see, that people would try to take to minimize to write me out of my own story. And he had prepared. When I stepped back into the sunlight, the box clutched tightly to my chest. I already knew who could help me turn it into something no one could steal. Diane Vasquez wore confidence like a second skin. Her office wasn't flashy, just stacks of well-thumbed legal pads, framed certificates, and a plant that had probably survived more clients than most marriages. She flipped through Morris's notebook in silence, her brow furrowing with the kind of focused interest that made me feel for the first time in days like something was finally turning in my favor. When she finished, she leaned back and gave a tight smile. Not warm, not soft-sharp. Calculated. Your husband, she said, tapping the open page, was meticulous. Client names, dates, descriptions, signatures. I've seen estate ledgers in crayon with more holes than cheesecloth. But this is gold. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Do I even have a chance? I asked. She arched a brow. More than a chance. The bonds are clean, already worth more than he likely imagined. But this, she lifted the notebook. This is where it gets interesting. These clients didn't just forget to pay. They likely hoped your husband's passing buried their debt. And it didn't, I said. She shook her head. No, ma'am. Not with this kind of documentation. I'll need a retainer. And time. But give me 3 months and I'll have most of this collected or in court. I opened my bag and handed her a check. The retainer barely made a dent in the bonds. Let's begin, I said. As Diane made copies, I sat across from her desk and for the first time opened social media. Camille had posted 3 new stories, sunlit cocktails matching aprons, and a pastel food truck parked beside a beach pier. Monroe Bites, the caption read. Thanks to my amazing mama for dreaming big. I stared at the screen. No mention of the watch, no note of apology, just pride. Smiling faces built on theft. Diane returned a clipboard in hand. We'll start with the top 5. Biggest balances, oldest dates. Good, I said. No leniency. She grinned, showing just a flash of teeth. I don't do leniency. That night I went home and placed Morris's notebook next to the watch, both resting on the nightstand like sentries. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was reclaiming what was mine. And I knew exactly where I'd begin tomorrow. I told them over dinner. Julian had just finished reheating a pan of lasagna. Camille was scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence, until I said, I'll be moving out by the end of the week. Camille looked up, blinking like she'd misheard. Wait. What? I found a place. Something small. Quiet. She let out a sharp laugh. Over a watch, Julian set his fork down. Mom, can we not do this right now? I looked at him. You always say that, Julian. Not now, not here, not like this. He stood pacing. Because you make everything a confrontation. You've been cold ever since Dad died. Then Camille tries to help her mom get back on her feet, and suddenly you're acting like we robbed a grave. You didn't just help her, I said. You took something that didn't belong to you, something sacred. And you didn't ask. You just decided. Julian's voice cracked. You always side with them, with your things, with your rules. No, I said, quietly. I just stopped confusing kindness with submission. Camille rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The room fell into silence. I opened my bag, pulled out an envelope, and set it on the table. It's a formal demand for repayment $800 to $500. That's what the pawn shop said Tyler walked away with. You'll have 30 days to respond before I pursue it through court. Julian didn't move. Camille's smile froze. You're suing your own family, she said. I'm holding people accountable, I replied. You may not like the word for it, but that's what it is. I left them in the kitchen, the envelope still sitting unopened between their plates. Upstairs, I began packing the few things I'd brought into their house books, sweaters, Morris's framed photograph. The space had never really been mine. The next morning, I drove to the post office and mailed a second copy of the demand letter by certified mail. Then I stopped by Diane's office to deliver an update and confirm next steps. As I walked back to my car, the sky breaking open in soft spring light, I saw the first check had arrived in her hands from a contractor Morris had once built a sunroom for. The envelope from Diane's office arrived at their doorstep 2 days later. By then, I had already returned my house key, boxed up my remaining things, and signed the lease for a quiet bungalow across town. Julian called first. His voice was low, desperate around the edges. Mom, you really filed it? I did, I said. It's not personal, Julian. It's principled. He paused. You really want to do this? Take Camille to court? No, I replied. I wanted you both to do the right thing before it got this far. Then Camille called. Her tone was shrill, almost comical in its righteousness. You think this makes you strong, dragging your family through lawyers? You're embarrassing yourself. No, I said again. I think I made myself very clear. Delphine showed up in my voicemail not long after. Heartless, she said. That's what you are. Cold and bitter. I didn't call back. I didn't argue. I simply forwarded each message to Diane and uploaded a photo of the police report I had filed the day I discovered the watch was gone. Camille's name spelled out in ink, time-stamped, signed. Then I sent the same photo without comment to Julian. The calls stopped. I finished moving in silence. I painted the living room a soft honey color, set Morris's toolbox on a clean new shelf, hung the photo of him fixing the porch swing on a spring afternoon, his watch catching the sunlight. Then one afternoon, just after I'd finished unpacking the last kitchen box, my phone rang again. Mr. Banning. Got a call you might want to hear about, he said. One of the names from your husband's notebook, Darrow Construction. Just sent a check to your lawyer, 30 grand. Apparently they forgot they owed it. I smiled, not because of the number, but because Morris had been right to write everything down. Every hour, every invoice, every slight accounted for. Thank you for letting me know, I said. You hang in there, Mrs. Whitfield, he replied. He'd be proud. That night, I lit a candle on the windowsill and placed the watch beside it, the engraving facing outward. I didn't need noise. I didn't need their apologies. I only needed this, a quiet room, a steady hand, and proof that dignity could outlast the shouting. The house wasn't large, but it had solid bones, oak floors that creaked just enough to remind you time had passed through them, and a front porch wide enough for a pair of rocking chairs. It sat on a tree-lined street, where neighbors still said good morning, and wind chimes danced against the eaves in the afternoon breeze. I didn't furnish it all at once. I chose carefully, room by room. A bookshelf in the study. A chipped ceramic lamp for the entryway. Every object earned its place. No clutter, no noise, no borrowed space. Morris's toolbox got its own bench in the garage. I opened each drawer, wiped every socket and wrench clean. It was the one space I didn't organize into something new. I left it the way he'd kept it. That was the point. It wasn't a workshop now. It was memory, proof of hands that built, repaired, and left behind something worth keeping. The watch didn't go back on my wrist. It had done its job. I placed it inside a shadow box on the nightstand, under a soft light. I mounted the note he'd hidden in the back next to it, framed like scripture. Every night before bed, I glanced at it. Not for the time, but for the reminder. You were always the builder. I just held the hammer. That sentence stayed with me. Not as flattery, but permission. Permission to stop waiting for others to define what was mine. Permission to stop giving the benefit of the doubt to people who had never once offered me the same. Permission to say no quietly and without apology. The first evening in the house, I sat on the porch with a mug of peppermint tea. The street smelled faintly of lavender and baked earth. A little girl on a tricycle wobbled past my gate and waved. Her mother, not far behind, smiled at me from their steps. I raised my hand in return. It was a small gesture, but it didn't come from a place of fear or politeness, or the urge to belong. It came from stillness, from knowing the ground beneath me was mine and that no one could pull it out from under me again. Inside, the phone buzzed a message from Diane. Another payment had cleared. This one from a hardware chain Morris once subcontracted for almost 15 years ago.